This week on Create, Consume, Repeat, we're taking a look at the 5 scariest video games ever made. And in case you're wondering, Resident Evil, albeit innovative, didn't make the cut. Cause terrible tank controls, well, they're unintentionally scary. The horror video game genre exploded onto the scene in 1981 with the release of Nostromo, a survival horror game where the player must escape a spaceship while avoiding being detected by an alien. And if that sounds really familiar, guess what? That's because it's the same plot as the 1978 horror classic Alien by Ridley Scott. At least change the name of the ship, am I right? As gaming grew in popularity and technology advanced, so did the genre. And in 1993, Seventh Guest would push the limits of the genre with an innovative, yet laughable by today's standards use of live-action video clips and an unprecedented amount of pre-rendered 3D graphics. 3 years later, Resident Evil would propel the genre forward yet again by creating a game with an immersive and dreadful atmosphere, filled with zombies and a common horror movie trope, scarce resources. Resident Evil would go on to become extremely influential, spawning a ton of sequels and terrible clones. But it wasn't until 1999, with the release of Silent Hill, that the most essential ingredient in all of horror was added, and that's psychological terror. With all that horror gaming history out of the way, let's jump in. Oh, actually, one more thing. In case you're wondering what qualifies me as an expert on horror, I used to work in the horror film industry. So buckle up. Number 5, Doom. The granddaddy of horror video games not only scared the shit out of a generation, it revolutionized video gaming. Nothing, and I mean nothing, has ever made people jump out of their chairs like battling demons down the tight corridors of the Phobos space station. From the demonic imagery plastered everywhere to the terrifying sound design, every detail oozes horror, coupled with lightning-fast, first-person, visceral action that no one had ever experienced before, and you have one of the scariest video games ever made. And for those trolls that would argue that its graphics no longer hold up, well, most video games, and horror films for that matter, don't either. But it doesn't tarnish that initial sense of terror scorched into our synapses when first experienced. Proof of this can be seen in films like Nosferatu or Rosemary's Baby for that matter. Number 4. Quake. It would have been enough for most teams to revolutionize video games once, but not so for the boys and girls at id Software. They not only changed gaming a second time by introducing the world to real-time 3D first-person shooters, they made us crap in our pants while doing so with what can only be described as a dark gothic universe filled with a hodgepodge of death knights, spider creatures, and shamblers. Sure, it felt a little all over the place, but once you heard that 9 Inch Nails soundtrack, id Software had us scared to turn off the lights and go to bed. Admit it, stop playing. Number 3. The Evil Within. Usually overlooked because of its challenging difficulty and cheap deaths, this game makes the list because of Shinji Mikami's refinement to the survival horror genre he helped create. Not to mention the stellar blend of nightmarish atmosphere, unsettling themes, and gore that feels like it was ripped straight from Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a little Hellraiser just kinda sprinkled in for fun. No one will argue that the story can be preposterous, if not ridiculous at times, but the sheer terror and dread one feels while playing it is unrivaled. Number 2, Alan Wake. What will be considered by most a highly controversial pick, Alan Wake takes the number 2 spot for creating a game that invaded our collective psyche, filling us with an uneasiness that lingered with us for days after we shut it off. Sure, the game's mechanics feel dated, but the storyline and visual cues feel like something out of David Lynch's mind, but directed by Stanley Kubrick. And if that doesn't pique your interest, well, I don't know what will.
Here's Johnny!
Number 1. Dead Space. Borrowing heavily from space horror films like Event Horizon and The Thing, Dead Space cherry picks all the best parts and weaves them into the best pound-for-pound horror game of all time. One minute you're sawing off necromorph limbs with your plasma cutter, and the next you're just drifting through the dark, silent void of space with only your shallow breathing to remind you that oxygen is running out. Talk about suspense. I could go on for hours praising its masterful use of zero gravity to disorient you and ratchet up the tension, or gush over the award-winning sound design that shatters your nerves when you least expect it. But why should I? You should just go out and play the game. It's that good. This is without a doubt the best horror game ever made. Period. Full stop. Don't agree with my list? Let me know in the comment section below, and don't be afraid to hit the like and subscribe buttons. Our Dark Lord demands it.